Hi, I'm JT and welcome to my podcast. I have a lot more podcasts to post, so stay tuned. Subscribe and join my VIP mailing list for stuff that I don't post on YouTube. The name of this podcast is the Hellenic Simulation. I started MTV because I thought music videos would be cool. But first, let me talk about my third youngest brother, because in the last podcast I talked about my two older brothers that are also in the Hellenic Simulation. If you don't know what the Hellenic Simulation is yet, please go back and listen to my podcast before this one. As I post podcasts, I'll try to keep them in order, but there's a lot of information to talk about. By the end of this podcast episode, you'll know why we chose Nina Blackwood to be the first ever music VJ on MTV. But before we talk about that, let's talk about my brother, which leads to one of my favorite R&B hits. My brother David was born on October 20th, the same day as actor Viggo Mortensen. Viggo Mortensen was actually in my birth city, a half-mile away from my current home, filming a movie. The name of the movie was an apocalyptic movie called The Road. He was in The Road with Charlize Theron, who played his woman. In another podcast, I'll talk about Charlize Theron and the Greek goddess Potnia Theron, but let's stick to Viggo Mortensen for now. Viggo is in the Hellenic Simulation, having been chosen to play the character Aragorn in The Lord of the Rings. In this simulation, the Lord of the Rings represents my father Zeus, because he is the Lord of the Olympic Games with the logo of the 5 rings. Of course, they really do not mean that, but they do for the Hellenic Simulation. Incidentally, the reason I'm divulging all of this information right now is because this summer's Olympics begin on July 26, and that's my father's birthday. Since 1896, when the Olympics went worldwide, there has never been a Summer Olympics that had their opening ceremony on my father's birthday. And before that, they were all held in Greece at Olympia in honor of Zeus. My birthday is the 19th, and that's how many days the Olympics are this year. Stay tuned for my podcast on the 2024 Olympics in Paris that I'll post real soon. In The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, they also represent the Twin Towers in New York City, USA. The same 2 towers that were in the movie Working Girl and Carly Simon's video Let the River Run. So am I saying that Zeus knocked down the Twin Towers? No, not at all. What I am saying is that the Twin Towers are in the country of my father, who is Zeus in the Hellenic Simulation. In the movie Working Girl, you'll also hear a main character refer to Cynthia. The name Cynthia comes from Mount Cynthus on the island of Delos in Greece, where Apollo and Artemis were born. And of course, Apollo is the son of Zeus. Viggo Mortensen's current partner is named Ariadne. In Greek mythology, Ariadne is married to the Greek god Dionysus, who is also a son of Zeus. Back to my brother David. The Road was partially filmed in my birth city, but the road that my brother's father lived on, yes, he is my half-brother, was called Davison. Isn't it interesting that my brother David came from a guy that lived on Davison Road? Davison means David's son, so his father really has a son named David now. The famous actor Bob Hope, and my father was named Bob, was married in my small birth city. He played a character named Ace Lanigan in an old movie called Road to Singapore. In the trailer of the movie, they call the beautiful women sirens. Oh brother, you'll say when I tell you this. My brother's last name is Lanigan, and in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, which is based on Greek mythology, there's a scene with sirens in it also. And in the movie, George Clooney's character is always looking for the hair pomade called Dapper Dan, and Dan is the name of my brother's father. Since they filmed The Road by my brothers in my house, we live very close, my brother has been using the place where they had the scene. It's a boat ramp, and my brother launches his kayak there and paddles around Lake Erie. The name of the boat ramp is Lakeside, and that brings me to the R&B song that I mentioned earlier. The name of the song is Fantastic Voyage by the band called Lakeside. If you really want to take a fantastic voyage, check out the starships that we have in the USA very soon. That we will have. All you have to do today is watch Star Trek Voyager. And my starship is mentioned by 7 of 9 in the episode Infinite Regress. We chose Captain Blackwood for my starship because Nina Blackwood was the first MTV VJ, and they used Apollo astronauts to hold their flag on the moon. Then a few years later, Charlotte Blackwood was in Top Gun with, of course, Tom Cruise, who was born in Syracuse, New York, which got its name from Syracuse, Italy, where there was a big temple to me, Apollo. So now that you know why we chose Nina Blackwood, let's talk a little bit about the start of MTV. One of the very first music videos that was shown on the first day, I believe, was the song Rockin' the Paradise by the group Styx. It was the 10th video shown, and it was regularly played throughout the first week of MTV. If you don't know what Styx means, you should really check it out, because in ancient Greek times and mythology, when a person would die, they would place a coin in their mouth so that they could pay the ferryman Charon to take them across the river Styx. If they did not pay the ferryman, they would have to roam around for eternity. However, if they did pay, they would be taken to the underworld and then hopefully be judged righteous and taken to Elysium, which is paradise. In the Hellenic Simulation, timing is everything. Let's examine what I just said and put it into perspective. One that's easier to understand. Rockin' the Paradise by Styx came out in 1981. Shortly after, Chris de Burgh released his song Don't Pay the Ferryman in 1982. This song video was also popular on MTV. Anyway, the skull in Don't Pay the Ferryman is representative of Charon, the name of the ferryman that took the dead across the river Styx. Charon is also the name of a moon around the planet Pluto, and Pluto is the lord of the underworld, or Hades in Greek mythology. In Greek mythology, the souls of the dead had a journey to make before reaching Elysium, the paradise, which is the realm for the blessed. Here's a detailed description of their journey. 1. Charon's ferry. After death, souls would be transported across the river Styx, or sometimes Acheron, by Charon the ferryman. To secure passage, the deceased needed a coin as payment, which was often placed in the mouth of the dead before burial. 2. Judgment. Upon crossing the river, the souls would arrive at the gates of the underworld, where they face judgment. 3 judges of the dead, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Acus, would determine the fate of each soul based on the deeds during their life. 3. The paths of the afterlife. Elysium. Souls who had lived righteous and heroic lives were granted entrance to Elysium, a place of eternal peace and happiness, pure paradise. Asphodel Meadows. Ordinary souls who had lived neither particularly good nor bad lives would go to the Asphodel Meadows, which was a neutral place. And the third place was Tartarus. Those who had led wicked lives or offended the gods were condemned to Tartarus, a place of torment and punishment. Thus, after being ferried by Charon and the judgment 3 judges, the virtuous and heroic souls would be guided to Elysium, where they would enjoy eternal bliss. Now this part I find interesting, and I hope you will too. Also in 1982, a movie came out called Paradise, and it starred Phoebe Cates. She sang the theme song, and you can listen to it on YouTube. The song reached #1 in Italy for like 12 weeks. The name Phoebe comes from Greek mythology, and Phoebe was the grandmother of Apollo, which is me in the Hellenic Simulation. Phoebe Cates was also the hottie in the movie Fast Times at Ridgemont High. In that movie, in the football game, the score ends 42-0, and the winners were the Wolves. Leto, who is my mother in the Hellenic Simulation, has a few sacred animals, and one of them is the wolf. She was also born the same year as my father in 1942, so therefore we made the score 42-0 in the movie. I can keep going and going, but I'll end this podcast with this one last note. Some people in the past have labeled Leto a she-wolf, so watch the Geico commercial with a family of wolves. It's quite entertaining. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned next week for another episode on the Hellenic Simulation. Please subscribe, watch all my podcasts, and join my top secret VIP mailing list for stuff that I won't talk about in my podcast. You can join my mailing list at www.jeffstips.xyz/Hellenic Sim. Thank you and have a good day.